Very pleasant good afternoon to all of our viewers around the Caribbean and further afield. We are delighted to be in your presence another time with another edition of Let's Talk. Let's Talk is a program sponsored by the Seventh day Adventist Church, the South Leeward Conference, and we deal with issues, we discuss issues, we provide answers to troubling questions that oftentimes affect church members and individuals in the wider community. Here at the South Leeward Conference, we believe that the Bible has all the answers, and we seek to provide guidance and to share from a Christocentric perspective. This afternoon, we have a special guest and we have a special topic. Many of you have already been saying that you are looking forward to this discussion. This afternoon, we discuss, should church members be involved in politics? And with us this afternoon is a special individual, one who is well suited. He serves the Inter-American Division as the Executive Secretary. We have with us Dr. Leonard Johnson. He was born in New Providence in Bahamas. He's married for quite a number of years now. Is a graduate of West Indies College, now the Northern Caribbean University. He graduated in 1981 with a degree in theology, and then in 1990 he earned a master's degree in religion from the Andrews University, and later on graduated with a Doctor of Ministry. And so we are delighted to have, he also, by the way, has an honorary doctorate of humane letters. We are delighted to have Pastor Leonard Johnson, Dr. Johnson, with us. He has held various positions. He has served in the local field as executive secretary, as president. He has served at the union level as president, at the division level as associate director in the ministerial department, and since 2018, he has been serving as the executive secretary of the Inter-American Division, General Conference Inter-American Division. This afternoon, it is my delight to welcome to Let's Talk, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson, good afternoon, and a word of greetings to those who are listening.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Carson, and certainly it's a pleasure and a joy to be with you on Let's Talk, and I look forward to sharing with you and with the audience. May God guide us in this exciting topic.
Indeed, exciting indeed. You know, the matter of politics has been quite a discussion, especially in the context of where we are living now. You know, we hear a lot about Black Lives Matter. We see a lot of racial injustice in various parts around the world. And some ask the question, shouldn't our politicians be Christians? At the same time, we do see that there is a level of corruption in some places around the world. And so the issue of members' involvement in politics. I have seen situations where churches have become divided. I have heard of stories where on one side of the church, there is a certain color, and on the other side, another color. And I've also had heard of an experience where one elder one Sabbath morning got up and said to the saints, brethren, please, it was around election time, and he said, please vote wisely. That's all he said, but half the church got up and left because they associated him with a particular party. So This is a very exciting topic, a very important discussion. And I want to begin, Dr. Johnson, by asking you just to say a word on our Christian responsibility, because there are some individuals who say that you shouldn't vote at all. So if you can make a statement on our Christian responsibility, that's a good place to begin.
Yeah, I think that's very appropriate, because I was looking at our position, just wanting to reacquaint myself and knowing that I was coming on this talk show. But we're reminded as Seventh-day Adventists, we recognize the legitimate role of organized government in society. And this is not something modern. This has been from that time that God sets up and he takes down. Now, having said that, as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, we have a responsibility to play. But as to how far we go with that and to the extent, that is another question. Um, as a church, we believe that we should encourage members to vote their conscience. We must not tell them who to vote for. And this is something that we have to look at very carefully because, as you've indicated, it can be very divisive. I can recall as a young pastor, I was taught by my senior pastors that whichever government emerges, and we're talking in the context now of small nation type of politics governments. In the Bahamas, this basically there are two parties, either the PLP or the FNM. Whichever one would win, our practice has been that we recognize that government as a duly elected government. And so we would pray for the government. We would, in a sense, support whatever we can support in terms of that which would align with our biblical principles. But after this particular party had won, and we said, I said as a young pastor, we recognize this government or this party as the government of the Bahamas. Those who were of the other side, they were greatly offended. And I was not doing anything wrong. But I saw from that experience how our church could be so divided on this matter of politics. Anyhow, I just use that as a beginning. I think I'll stop there because we'll get more into details as we go along.
Yes, indeed. So we are therefore saying that we have a responsibility to support governance because
Yes.
the Bible acknowledges that God sets up governments, he takes them down, etc. Now
Yes.
let's go a little more into the whole matter of you mentioned those of us in small island states, and we know that the political atmosphere can be quite different in these places where we have these small island states. The nature of the division that can come as a result. So if, as a Christian, I feel that I am called to serve my state, if I feel that God is calling me to serve my state, how should I respond and what should I do?
Okay. It says here, there's a question, and I was looking at this in Adventist today. Is it right for Seventh-day Adventists to hold political office? That is analogous to the question that you're asking me. We believe as a church that we should not interfere with a person's conscience if he or she feels led to serve his or her state or country through the area of politics. But certainly as a pastor, I would counsel my member to be very careful and to try to adhere to Adventist Christian principles. And sometimes that could be a challenge in these small countries in which we live and operate, because we have what is known as partisan politics. Mainly what we're talking about is either you're for this particular party or you're for the other party. And so by aligning with a given party, you are essentially agreeing to the positions of your party. You are expected to support. In the American system, what I've discovered is that I could be a Republican or I could be a Democrat, and I don't have to stand with my party in every given instance. But going back to the original question, yes, if one feels that he or she is being called by God, certainly, as a church, we do not interfere. That is a decision for the person to make.
Okay, very well. Now, the other question would be, if I have that conviction and I decide I'm going to serve my country, how does that interfere with my influence in the church, with my involvement in the church, etc.?
Hmm.
I want to think, let me add, Dr. Johnson,
Okay.
that sometimes I look back at what's going on around the world, not just the Caribbean, but around the world.
Hmm.
And I do believe that everybody would agree that if we had leaders of principle, leaders who were committed to God, that the world would be a different place. So we're talking about a sort of dilemma here. I remember, let me just reference this very quickly. I remember many years ago, in a particular district I served, we had an AY program and we were talking on this very topic.
Yes.
There was a former politician who was a member of the church, and he was on the panel. We had a panel discussion, and the question was put to him directly by a young person in the church. If a young person were to come to you and say that I want to get involved in politics, what would your advice to him be?
Hmm.
And his response, the politician's response was, if you want to serve God, serve God. If you want to serve politics, go into politics. But then he did clarify, he did say the temptations are, are great. And he made a reference. He said, sometimes Parliament is discussing a particular bill that can be bad for certain business establishment. The business owner may call you and say, listen, I'm going to give you $50,000 to keep your hand down when it's time to vote.
Hmm.
And if you're not very rich, getting $50,000 just to keep your hand down can be quite a temptation. So
Yes.
he was saying that the temptations are great, and one needs to know about his strength of character before he goes there. So, what counsel can we give?
Well,
I know we say that it's, we're not going to rebuke the people who feel called to serve their states, but what counsel can we give?
okay. I would say be certain that this is something God is directing you into. Okay. If you're doing it otherwise, as that individual has said, you will probably compromise and give in to some of the temptations. I have seen this with some of our folks where I pastored, and I can think of there was a young man, very gifted, and I want to be careful how I say this. And the then leader of that party, who was the opposition leader, he paid a courtesy call, made a courtesy visit, and met with the administration and the pastors. And he said, one of your members is aligning himself with this party and seeking to become a candidate in the upcoming elections. And I told him it could be a challenge. Now, if the leader of the party would say that, you know exactly where he was headed. And sure enough, our member was elected to parliament. He became a member of parliament for a certain constituency. And he was coming to church. And then after a while, there were some Sabbaths when he probably found it difficult to come to church. And then the party would hold events on the Sabbath. And whereas there was not the identification with the party, after a period of time, you saw a moving in a certain direction. And so when I see things like that, it makes me want to say, no, do not get involved. But on the other hand, when I look at the biblical example of Daniel, of course, now Daniel was in a different situation. He was in a situation where, in some ways, he had no choice but to serve the king. But when I look at his principles now, I see that Daniel does not compromise. And because of the person that Daniel was, Daniel served under Nebuchadnezzar. He served under, what's it, the other one, we come to Daniel chapter 6, Cyrus, and then Darius. But I found something so amazing about the words of the king. It says here in Daniel chapter 6, It pleased Darius, this is verse 1, to set over the kingdom of 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these three governors, of whom Daniel was one. In the other version, it says really the preferred one, and that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Now, how do you interpret that? Daniel's integrity, even though the government had changed from the Babylonian government, we were now in the government of the Medes and the Persians. Daniel's reputation preceded him, and the king wanted him to be a part of his government, all right? So that he may not suffer any loss. I feel that one can stand up, but he or she must be convinced this is what God wants me to do, and I'm going to stand up for principles. I am not going to compromise. And I cannot make that determination for that person, Dr. Greene.
So you're saying, Doc, that any individual, now I think to some extent we should be able to say this of everybody, but particularly for the Christian, that person needs to ensure that the strength of character is of such that if you are being pressured to do wrong, to get into corruption, to violate the principles of the Bible, that you are strong enough to say, this is my stand. And if it means that your political party is causing you to go against the principles of the Bible, that you would rather leave than to leave God. That's kind of what I hear you saying.
Yes, Margaret Thatcher, she made a statement. I hope I have this correct, because as you were talking, it came to mind. There are some people who leave their party for their principles, and there are others who leave their principles for their party. It is my hope that those who are called by God will leave their party's position for their principles. It must always be God first.
Now, I want to get into, so on the one hand, there are individuals who may feel that they want to run for political office. We have spoken about the challenges in that arena and what it can mean. I already see a few questions that we will address in a few minutes, but the other concern that can be a challenge is not an individual deciding that they want to run for office, but individuals' support for political parties. So okay. if in Antigua, where I live, we have two main political parties. There, every now and then another one comes up, but two main political parties. There is the Antigua Barbuda Labour Party, and there is the United Progressive Party. In St. Kitts, in Nevis, in Montserrat, you do have more or less the two-party system. However, if I should decide to support one side as opposed to the other side, I guess you would agree that that is my own.
You're right as a citizen.
Exactly. But what happens now when I get involved in making my views public, when I try to persuade others to join with me, and when I begin to ostracize individuals who do not share my perspective? What are the challenges for those things on the in terms of your Christian responsibility? Can you react to that?
Okay. If I'm dealing with you specifically, you're not just a citizen of Antigua or given place. You're not just entitled to your right as a citizen, but you have a substantive position as a leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Here is the difference. When I say a regular member, a member who does not hold office may decide, this is what I want to do. I even want to campaign for this particular party. But as long as he or she can draw the line when it comes to the church, when it comes to the premise of the church, I have to draw the line. But as a leader within the church, as a leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Antigua, yes, I have a right to choose whichever party. But when I begin to make that known publicly, and I begin to use my influence to encourage others to go in a certain direction. That is unacceptable as a leader of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Um, it says the church has never, and I'm reading this from the review of August 14, 1952. The church has never attempted to instruct its members as to how they should vote or for whom they should vote. These are matters that must be left to the members' individual conscience, nor has the church placed any ban or censure on its members if they, as qualified citizens, choose to exercise their right to vote on any who they may choose or any who they may choose not to vote, okay? But there was something else I read here. Very definite instruction has been given that our ministers and teachers and managers, no, that's not the one. The one that I want. Yes, it is not for the church to advise any man to accept political position, nor has the church the right to deny any of its members this privilege and right. There was a statement I read which would have supported what I said, but I'll find it in the process. But in answer to your question, no, it is not acceptable, Dr. Greene, for us as leaders to make known our position publicly, because based on our influence, we're going to be either encouraging persons to come or we're going to be dividing the church because some are going to be offended because we're not a part of their side or their particular preference. So I would encourage a leader, a religious leader, by all means, keep out of the public light of politics.
You know, I came across a quotation. I believe it's something similar you were looking at just now. And this one is in Selected Messages, Volume 2, pages 336, 337. It says, whatever the opinions you may entertain in regard to casting your vote in political questions, you are not to proclaim it by pen or voice.
Yes.
Our people need to be silent upon questions which have no relation to the third angel's message. So the sense I'm getting here is that I have a personal conviction. I can go to the polling booth and express that by voting. I think we are clear. We have seen, you made several references to our position in terms of the individual member's responsibility to cast his or her vote. And we're making clear that that is not wrong. But we are saying that the individual should not be expressing his or her opinion publicly concerning who to vote for and who not to vote for.
Exactly.
Now, that's very interesting because we do have situations locally. I can only speak in the local context. And when I say locally, I'm talking about around the Caribbean. We do have local situations where on a particular political platform, you have members who are actively involved and who are actively persuading individuals who they should vote for versus who they should not vote for. And we're saying that those things do tend to allow us to lose our influence as Christians. Am I getting you correctly?
Yes. You asking the question, can that cause you to lose your what? Christian? Repeat the question.
I am I'm saying that when an individual who is a member of the church is supporting a particular political party and becomes actively involved in the campaign process.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm speaking to. So I may not be running for public office, but I'm supporting a candidate.
I'm campaigning.
Part of his campaign party. And so I speak on the political platform. I speak against what the other side is doing, and I'm encouraging people. I'm out there knocking on doors, telling people to vote for this one and that one. Where do we stand in such measures?
Okay. As long as, and this is sometimes it's hard to process in these small state countries where we operate or where we live. once you associate with a party, I'm not talking about a leader of a church now, I'm talking about someone who decides to support a given party. The tendency is when you have discussions, you tend to give your reasons why you think this particular party should be considered for government or for leadership in a given place. And so you're going to put forth your arguments. Now, a Seventh day Adventist member who's a member of your church and identifies with a given party and campaigns for that party is going to encounter members, no doubt, in a particular area because members live all over the place. For me, as long as he or she can keep that outside of the church, outside of the Sabbath school, the church services, and what have you, that's the right of the person to move about. Okay? The same way how you come to me as a member and say, this is why I think you should consider this particular party, Pastor John said. I have the right to not to engage you. I could listen to what you're saying. Because certainly, if we're going to be informed, Dr. Greene, about what this party and the other party has to offer, let's be really real here. We're going to listen to the campaign speeches. We listen on our television. We listen on our radio. We're going to listen to the different persons. We read the newspaper. We see what they have to say, and then we're going to make a decision. The reading, the listening, being campaigned by a person is not necessarily wrong. It is when I begin now to bring that into the premise of the church, and I begin to come to the desk and encourage the politicians to come there so that they have their part. We are really going beyond, we're crossing the boundary. But I don't know that we could fault the person for campaigning for his or her preferred party. That's their right in the community.
There is a document that the church has put out. A document, I believe the title of it is Church-State Relations and the
Yes, I have a copy of it right here.
Yes, and there are some broad principles that are outlined there. Perhaps for the next few minutes we can run through those, if you will, because we do have a number of questions, and I want to begin to take some of the questions that the viewers are asking. So perhaps we can pull one or two of those statements, Dr. Johnson, in terms of the perspective of the Seventh Adventist Church as we discuss the broad principles, and see what where we stand. We know that as a Seventh-day Adventist Church, that our primary responsibility is to proclaim the good news of salvation. But when we get into matters like campaigning and taking sides, that can become a challenge sometimes. So the document here says, for example, we should participate in the voting process available to us when it is possible to do so in good conscience, and should share the responsibility of building our communities. Adventists, it says, should not, however, become preoccupied with politics or utilize the pulpit or publications to advance political theories. Can you comment on that?
Okay, I think we have commented on this already. When we say Adventists getting into politics, right? This is where you are taking a leading position. At the same time, the church says that if one decides to go into politics, that the church should not become conscience for that person. So there would seem to be a sort of disconnect between those two positions. How else can you get into running for a political office if you're not going to side with that party, campaign with that party, and what have you? Okay?
Okay, very well. Now, another statement that I find interesting in this document, it says the true Adventist is not of this world. I believe I heard you made reference to that earlier on. He is swiftly on his way out, yet while passing through, he seeks to attract other men to the heavenly kingdom by translating its divine principles into human action. Then it goes on to say that the Christian life is not to be a haphazard emotional life. The true Christian influence exerted for the accomplishment of the work of God has appointed him is a precious agency, and it must not be united with politics or bound up in a confederacy with unbelievers. I'm going to ask you to comment. God is to be the center of attraction. Every mind that is worked by the Holy Spirit will be satisfied with him.
Okay. Let me read a statement maybe that will add some light to that from the same document, right?
Sure.
When Adventists become leaders or exert influence in their wider society, this should be done in a manner consistent with the Golden Rule. We should therefore work to establish robust religious liberty for all and should not use our influence with political and civil leaders to either advance our faith or inhibit the faith of others. It says here, throughout the history of the people of God, the Lord has seen fit to delegate individuals to represent his message to rulers of the time. Abraham, Joseph, Moses, all dealt directly with the Pharaoh of their time. Esther's presence in the court of King Ahasuerus resulted in saving God's people from destruction. Daniel was first a representative to the Babylonian Empire and later to Cyrus the Persian and Darius the Mede. Paul carried the gospel to the ruling class of the Roman Empire. Similarly, many of the great reformers stood before their rulers of their day to advocate their position. We would be therefore remiss if we were not to endeavor to represent Christ to the leaders of this world in our current time. Now, the flip side of this, Pastor, is that when I side with a party, I begin to diminish my influence because people on the other side do not want to associate with me. And this is why the council is really, whereas a member has the right to get into politics, it would be advisable if the member did not get into politics. You would have heard me say qualifyingly at the beginning, if you're going to get into it, be certain that this is where God is leading you and not you yourself.
Okay, now here's a direct question from our viewers, one of our viewers.
Okay.
Should a member who is actively engaged in politics hold office in church? That's a direct question. And you are the secretary of the Inter-American Division.
Let me answer you because our time is going. I would say no. A person who is directly involved in politics should not serve as an officer of the church.
Let me just ask you,
in a prominent position.
What are some of the drawbacks to that? Why would we adopt a position like that? Just okay, so that members are clear on this.
Okay, see, people do not see me as Leonard Johnson, the elder. They see me as Leonard Johnson, the member of this party, and what have you. And that becomes a distraction. That is not to say, as Leonard Johnson, I am not upholding to the principles of my church. But if that's going to become a distraction, the church doesn't need that. As a pastor, I would want to advise that member just to step aside at this point in time while you are involved in your party politics, even though I may have voted for that party, or the majority of the members may have voted for that party or not voted for that party. Step aside, because in every congregation, you're going to have people who support this one or the other one. And you don't want anything to become a distraction unnecessarily. For that reason, I would ask the person to step aside.
Okay, now, for Dr. Johnson, there's some very interesting remarks in our chat here. And I want to read one or two and to get your feedback.
Okay.
Someone here says, in these times, Adventist members would be well advised to steer clear of politics. What is challenging is that most individuals exert themselves and commit more to politics than to the cause of Christ. and someone else is asking, how do you reconcile Joseph being the prime minister of Egypt and Daniel holding political office? I believe you commented on that already, but in terms of Joseph and Daniel, um, I would dare say that they did not campaign.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Except if you want to say their character spoke for them.
that's right.
You know, because I could read a passage from Genesis and indirectly someone may say Joseph in presenting his resume, even though he didn't know what he was doing. No, but go ahead.
But here is someone else saying, because we want to give a balanced perspective.
Yes.
I think we as Christians should, let me get it right. I think we as Christians, I believe the person meant to say, should take part in politics to reflect Christianity through leadership and be an example to others. So this is an interesting perspective. Someone is saying, well, if the Christian shies away, who do we leave it to?
But you see, that is a balancing point too. But there's always the question if I'm going to stand up, if I'm going to remain true. And that's why I keep saying, I cannot become conscience for you, my brother or my sister. If you are convicted that this is something God wants you to do, then you go ahead and you do it. But demonstrate that this is from God by the way how you stand up for God and you will not compromise. You know, some years ago, when I served in the Bahamas, I was asked to serve on a board. I didn't know that it was the practice. Well, let me say this. Let me say it. It was the board for the airport authority. What I have observed before me is that they would ask different religious leaders to serve on certain boards. And so when I was asked by the then government, I was reluctant. And after I sought counsel, I decided that, okay, I will serve. But when we would have board meetings, the chairman would always ask me to pray. And then there came up the question of should we install slot machines at the airport because we could make more money? And then they will always look at me and say, Pastor, I know you're not going to agree with us. And I said, no, you know my position. I am opposed to this. Okay. And so they always respected my position. And as long as I was on that board, they never made the decision to go with slot machines at our airport in the Bahamas, right? Now, my position and stance was, I would say, they constituted a positive influence. When it came to providing lunch or any function they were having, they would always make certain that they provided what I would eat. And then now, it was one Friday, they were opening up a new phase of the airport, and the chairman wanted me to pray, all right? And it was a Friday evening. The sun would set shortly. And I debated, I sought counsel with my then union president and with the division. And the feeling was that I could go and do the prayer. But the reason why I chose not to do it, it was not wrong for me to go and do the prayer. But there were a number of social activities leading up to the prayer. And I would be kind of selfish not to identify with them. And if it went over time, I would get into the Sabbath, and knowing how this would be offensive to some of the members because I being a church leader, I opted not to do it. The chairman was so disappointed. If he had thought about it, he said he would have arranged it on another day. That's how much my presence meant to him. To cut the story short, the Anglican bishop was the one who was asked, no, the Catholic bishop was asked to do it instead. But I felt good by standing up. So I'm saying, if we're prepared to stand up, yes, our Christian influence can have a great impact upon that group, upon that party, and by extension, upon the nation.
Very well. If we can go back, Doc, to the document in terms of the church giving some perspectives, there is a section there that talks about the what is required of a Christian politician, Adventists in active politics. Members who desire to seek public office should ensure by the grace of God that spiritually they stay in tune with God. There are a couple more statements along that line that I find very interesting. Another one says the politician should endeavor to maintain such regular spiritual disciplines as prayer, Bible study, and especially maintain fellowship with fellow believers by attending services on Sabbath. And let me just read one more, the political campaigns of the Adventist politician. So we're talking about those individuals who are really convinced that this is what God is calling them to do.
Yes.
The political campaigns must be marked by dignity, civility, and Adventist Christian values. And I want you to speak to this. The Adventist Christian experience should be a positive influence on others. Now, when we talk about dignity, civility, and Adventist Christian values in a political campaign, we know what we're accustomed to. And I can't any longer say in these parts because I'm seeing this coming through even in American politics now, where
Yes.
people are calling people names and that kind of stuff. And somebody in the chat is asking, can there ever be a clean campaign? The tendency to make the other side look bad, how does that interfere with my Christian dignity and my ethical responsibilities?
I think you have answered it even by the way how you put the question to me. One who is governed and led by Christian principles, Adventist Christian principles, is one who's going to find it hard to tear down. If I have to tear down to build up my party, I cannot support that. And here again, this is why I'm telling you, I find it a challenge to get into the type of politics that we have in these small state countries, because that seems to be the order of the day. It's like you have to say why you shouldn't vote for this person. Okay, as opposed to just how do I advance my agenda in terms of these are the things that I want to do for this particular community or constituency if I'm elected, as opposed to saying, you don't want this person doesn't serve the Lord, this person doesn't, this person drinks alcohol, this person does this and that. That's not the way how an Adventist wants to operate, because he or she has a higher calling. That person may not win the constituency, but let's say you become more convicted in your heart. I need to go and reach that person for the Lord Jesus Christ. I have already created certain barriers because I've torn down that person in the community. If I accepted the bribe of $50,000, how do I go and try to win that person? That person is going to look at me and say, don't mind him preaching, or don't mind him teaching, or calling the name of Christ. He or she is not for real. So I'm saying that drawing the line between my politics and my God, I have to look at that carefully. I have to determine which master I really want to serve. And someone may ask me the question, can you serve the two?
Well, let me add another question to this, Doc. Again, somebody's asking um, about the appropriateness of me not, the statement said just now that we should not by voice or pen try to persuade others how to vote. So I make the assumption that I'm not going to say it, I'm not going to write it, but I'm going to put on the colors. And it is Sabbath morning, and I have personally seen vehicles decked in the
Yes.
parking lot,
Yes.
covered with political paraphernalia, etc., and
Mhm.
individuals going to church in the party colors. Can you react to that? They say they're not speaking and they're not writing, but they're in the party colors.
Oh, what I tell you, say this is a very difficult one. You know, as a pastor, I have encouraged my members, don't do it. Okay. But they come to church. The car's parked out there in the parking lot. What do? Do I send them away? They're not in the church now campaigning, but to see that car and depending where it's parked, it's a subtle message that is being conveyed. I'm saying, go with this party, go with this particular candidate. I'm saying it by what I have on my car. Okay. I would encourage the member not to do it. As I said at the beginning, if this is the choice you're making, keep it to yourself. Keep it outside of the premise of the church. But I recognize that if you're going to be campaigning for the person, yes, you're going to be moving about and what have you. But when it comes to the church and its premises and so on, I would say keep away. And here again, it goes back to something that I said, not only for the pastor, but it comes back to the more and more we discuss it, the more and more I am being led to take a position of just discouraging people from getting involved, period. Because depending on what I do, if I don't govern myself appropriately as a child of God, I'm going to find it difficult when my church is having an outreach campaign in the area. When I'm going to that particular neighborhood and I'm saying, I want you to come and visit our crusade, to come to our meetings, people are not going to see me first and foremost as a member of the church. They're going to see me first and foremost as a member of the political party. Now, if it's the party that they had preference to or they prefer, it's not a problem. But if the party that they didn't prefer, and these people wear politics so close to their heart, I become now a stumbling block to this person maybe coming to accept Jesus Christ just because of my public stance. So one has to weigh this carefully, Pastor, in our small communities.
I want to read a short statement, and then there is another very interesting question that I want to ask you, Doc.
Okay.
Again, going back to the document, it says here that, let me just find the correct paragraph quickly. Our churches should not be used as platforms for the furtherance of political agendas, both by our members and non-members. And then more specifically, it says here, certain political terms, party attire, so this is specific, and insignia should not be displayed within the precincts of the church. So the church is saying that the political terms, party attire, and insignia should not be displayed within the precincts of the church. Members of the church should avoid strife and divisions in the church by not bringing political questions into the church. Now, here is my question to you. Actually, this is not my question. This is one of the questions from one of the viewers, and I think it's a very important question. Should Christian leaders openly and publicly criticize or condemn perceived wrongs done by governments or politicians and public servants? So this is taking a slightly different slant now, but you are a pastor, you are an elder in the church, and you perceive that the government is going in the wrong direction. Should I address that publicly from the pulpit or otherwise? I think this is what the person is asking.
Okay. We have to be extremely careful in this regard. We speak not to a particular party, we speak to issues. But let me clarify, Pastor. In these small communities, it is hard for people to separate issue from parties, from the government, and from people. Let me give you a case in point. Some years ago, I spoke on the matter of gambling because it was wreaking havoc upon basically the poor people in the Bahamas. I was given the opportunity to speak at a national service for the country, and I addressed the issue. Now, there were persons who felt
I missed the issue that you said you addressed. What was it?
Gambling. Gambling.
Okay, gambling. All right, wonderful.
And some people felt that I was speaking against the then government. Okay, we support the government in terms of the fact we recognize as a duly elected government. They were invited to the church. We have them to address the church on different occasions and what have you. And we attended functions and so on and so forth. But by speaking to that issue, it was determined that I was knocking the government. Now, here again, I cannot ask a pastor to be silent on issues that need to be addressed. But I have to ask the pastor, seek counsel. If you feel a certain way, talk with your conference president, talk with other pastors. Make sure that you present it as you are given counsel because sometimes we could do more damage than good. Okay. But I feel that we miss out on a number of opportunities before issues come up to address some things. For instance, in the area of health, in the area of education, we have so many opportunities to voice and to say some things. There was a campaign that we had against smoking in public places, in taken on by one of our pastors, and was very effective with it. Okay, so we have opportunities sometimes before some of these become issues. We have an opportunity to be proactive and to do something so that people know, as Adventists, we do not get involved in politics like that. But they know that we speak up to some of these issues. But sometimes when we're trying to catch up, we get ourselves into problems. So, in answer to your question, I would say I am not going to say to a pastor or to a religious leader that you cannot speak against certain things. But he or she has to be prayed up and has to weigh carefully as to how you present what you have to present. There are some members who tell you, no, you're trying to soften the message or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we live in a real world, and you want to be certain that how you come across representing God and not something that you want to say and come across in a certain way. It can do a lot of damage for the church.
So therefore, as a leader of God's church, I should be guided by the principles of objectivity.
Yes.
I should be able to acknowledge right and condemn wrong.
Yes.
I think it is important that if I speak to principle.
And not to party or to person.
Wonderful.
Pastor, let me inject this here too. You have to be extremely careful, because if you're not careful and alert, something, let's say this is something that I'm speaking against, an issue, and it's associated with the government of the day. But the opposition now is doing something and advocating something, and my voice is not heard. Do you see what is happening? People begin to say, well, what happened to Pastor Greene? He was speaking the other day about this issue, but look at this one here now in the light of this particular of the opposition, what they're advocating. But the church is not saying anything about it. And that's why I'm saying that it is so difficult, even with what's happening now in America, right? There's this systemic racism. We know that. But sometimes because a Black person is shot by the police, you have to be very careful to speak too soon or to speak too late. You have to be guided, because you may not have all the facts, you may not have all the information, but I could speak to the way how someone is treated. That's the issue I can speak to. That is very clear in my mind. I think it was George Floyd, the way how that person was his life was taken. I could speak to that issue. You follow what I'm trying to say to you?
Okay, now I want to, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you definitely. Now, because our time is almost gone, I have to
The hour
pull.
went by so quickly. I'm trying to figure it.
Indeed, indeed. Now, so far we have seen, just by way of summary, that individuals have the right to exercise their freedom to vote. We are saying too that the church is not going to be the conscience for people, but
No.
individuals must understand that if they are deciding to go get involved in active politics, that they're being guided by God,
Yes.
and that it is going to be a challenge. It is going to be requiring a lot of Christian character. We are also saying that individuals who are running for political office cannot expect to be at the same time involved in leadership positions in the church. Again, particularly because of the influence and how they may be perceived by one side or the other. We are also saying that, and I think this is very quite clear from the statement the church made, that political paraphernalias, one should not come to church with their cars decked
Yes.
in campaign posters and that kind of thing. We should try to keep all of those things off the property of the church, our actions, our words, etc. Now, there is a question here, Doc, that is also very important. I just looked across at the chat and just pulling a question or two
Mm.
from random, because we don't have all the time in the world. But where is it? It looked like my screen moved. The question really was, what are your views on allowing politicians to give speeches from the church's pulpit during celebratory services, so that we are having a groundbreaking ceremony. We invite the political representative in that particular area, and we ask him or her to make a statement. What are your views on that? That's the
Okay.
question the person is asking.
Okay. Let me, I'm happy to address that. We must remember that we live in a society, and the church needs also government. There's some of us who isolate ourselves and remove ourselves altogether from government. We've benefited over the years when we've had to address matters of immigration, address issues related to members, because of the fact that we maintain a working relationship with all governments, everyone. So if we needed to speak up for a member or even someone who is not a member of society, we were in a position to do so without compromising. When a person comes to a church to speak at the opening of a session, at the groundbreaking or the dedication of a church building, that is not a political event. That person has already been elected by the people. He or she or the government is the duly elected government of the country. And we admonish as Christians to honor and to pay respect to whom respect and honor is due. I am not seeing that person as this. I'm seeing that person as an elected official. Now, we must instruct these people when they come to our church. This is not a platform for promoting your party. We are inviting you to come because remember now, we want them to see how the church operates. Some people believe that the Adventist church is a cult and we have some things we want to hide. Let them come in and experience our worship. They could come and bring greetings on behalf of the government. They may even want to make a statement, but nothing is wrong with that. We've had to educate our people over the years that it is appropriate to have the Minister of Housing, the Minister of Health. We're having a health emphasis, and we want the minister to come. And we've invited them to our functions, and they have come in and they have even supported these functions. They said, we need this partnership with the Adventist Church to teach the nation about health principles. Okay? And so, in answer to your question, yes, it is appropriate. But at the same time, we must be very careful during a campaign time. You want to be very careful in having these persons come. If one is going to come from this particular party and the other one doesn't come from the other party, you could be getting into problems. You have to be guided by the Spirit of God, common sense and good judgment.
Yeah, I'm glad you're addressing the issue there of respect for the leading side, because we have had to say this over and over to members.
Right.
When the campaigning is over and the government is sworn in,
Yes.
that becomes the government of the day, and we are separating in our roles politics from the government. And so if the church is having a function, out of courtesy, we invite the standing government to give a remark. That is legitimate and perfectly okay. Some members seem to not understand that, and they become upset because, again, members become so involved in this partisan politics that once they see a political figure, they're not thinking government, they are thinking, oh, it's this side versus that side.
Yes.
And the Bible does say that we should give honor to whom honor is due.
Yes.
Well, now, Doc, our time is up. So we do have lots of questions, but our time is up. So we're going to give you an opportunity to make some closing statements. One of these days we will bring you back We will take all the unanswered questions and we will just discuss them. But we're
Okay.
so very grateful for your presence this afternoon. We know that somebody in your capacity has to be extremely busy, and we really do appreciate having you. We want to, we're going to take one last question. So I will just be tempted to go 5 minutes over and take one last question. And I'm going to pull this purely at random.
Okay.
Should Christians, this is just, I just flipped the screen and I'm pulling
Yeah.
this one.
Sure.
It says, should Christians participate in public demonstration, pickets against government policies? So that's an interesting one.
It we have to be extremely careful. Let me give you a point in case. Some years ago, there was a gay ship coming to a particular place, and it's a gay cruise. And
I
there were
remember that.
religious leaders who said that we should all get together and demonstrate. A question was put to the group: why is it that we're not demonstrating against unfaithfulness in marriage locally? Now, right away, it was perceived that the Seventh day Adventist Church supports the gays, the gay movement. No, the Seventh day Adventist Church does not support the gay movement. We are opposed to it. But here is the point: if you're not careful, you could get caught up in some of these demonstrations and we lose our way. It may be better in some instances to demonstrate in different ways on our jobs by standing up for certain principles so that people will know. But when we just pick out that particular item, we begin to lose our influence in other areas. And drawing the balance, or determining that particular line, it is not always easy, Dr. Greene. I want to be real with you. All right. I always take the position we have to counsel with our leaders, we have to seek guidance, because it is so easy to say they are opposed to this. Let us say that there was this move some years ago that we were going to close all businesses on Sundays and require that no work, nothing be done on that particular day. That is something that affects us. And guess what? There were a number of churches in this particular area who were siding with the position of the government when they were making this move. And these were Christian churches coming out and saying, yes, people need to go to church on Sunday. As Adventists, we were opposed to that, not just because we worship on Saturday, but it became a matter of religious liberty. When you're dealing, now this is another topic, Pastor. I don't want to get into this now because we will start a whole new conversation. In answer to your question, I would say be very careful what you demonstrate against. Be very careful, very careful. It's
Indeed.
hard for me to answer you to say yes, go with this one, or no, don't go with that one. I would say be very careful. It may seem right, but there's sometimes a subtle approach to those who are organizing the march and so on. And as a church, we get caught up in it. Okay? We have to be careful.
Well, thank you so much, Doc, for your wise counsel and
Oh, I
the
want to make a
contribution.
statement. I wanted to say something before we conclude, if you would allow
Oh,
me.
sure, go right ahead.
Let me share something with you. Some of you may have heard of one of the longest serving political leaders in the Caribbean, the late Sir Lyndon Pinling. He was Prime Minister of the Bahamas, if I'm not mistaken, for 25 years. Before he became Prime Minister, he was a Seventh-day Adventist at one of the local churches, but he went off to England, studied, and came back and got into politics. Didn't really identify with the church during those years. But it's amazing. His government took some positions that favored Adventists. One, there was a 6-day work week cycle. They reduced it to 5 so that Adventists could get the weekend off. They didn't have to go to work on Sabbath, those who worked for government. Okay. When he was in his 60s or so, he decided to return to the church. By this time, he had lost, and now I think he might have been in opposition, or he might even have been retired. And he was rebaptized. I was there at his baptism, his rebaptism, and he became a member of one of the local churches as a Sabbath school teacher. When he died, he left. Of course, it was left in his will instructions that he must be buried by the Adventist church. His wife will tell you her preference would have been the Anglican church, but she decided to honor her husband's request. Okay. And that was probably the biggest funeral that ever took place in the Bahamas. Pastor Aubrey, who died, he did the memorial service. Pastor Roach, who just died on Thursday, did the main service. That was so impactful that people started to look at the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I'm saying to you that Sir Lyndon did more in his closing years to advance his church than he did in his previous years. I cannot become the conscience for one, and I try to be very careful. If God is leading a young person or any individual, a lady, to become involved in politics, all I will say to that person, pray and fast and determine that for certainty, this is what God wants you to do. And if you come out with the conviction that this is what he wants you to do, stand up for him under all circumstances, even if it means that you're going to lose your position or you're going to be rejected by your party. God will have a purpose in it. But when we begin to compromise, we lose respect. And in essence, we also lose our influence. I pray that God will really guide us and help us in this area. It's a very sensitive topic and subject, but I just pray that what we have discussed, Pastor, has been in accordance with God's will. That's my greatest desire, in accordance with God's will. And if we have erred, may God have mercy on us.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much again, Doc. We really, really do appreciate your presence, and we hope to see you back on Let's Talk sometime in the near future.
Certainly.
Just for the benefit of our viewers, next week we are going to be joined by Dr. David Trim. He's Director of Archives and Statistics from the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. We're going to be discussing this very important subject of membership conservation and what the statistics tell us. Dr. Trim is eager and excited to be with us. Many of you, no doubt, may have seen his picture. Some of you may know who, if you listen or watch Hope Television. Yes. He's the historian there. In case you are wondering who am I talking about, I believe I can just quickly
yes, that's David.
Photo up on the screen.
It might be a little longer now.
That's right. He is going to be our guest on Let's Talk next week, and I'm looking forward. I'm really looking forward to having him. He's excited about being here, and we just want to remind all of you that at 3 o'clock on Sabbath afternoon, we're here on Let's Talk. After Dr. David Trim, the following week, which is going to be September 19, I believe, we hope to have out of the UK, I keep forgetting the doctor's name, but we're going to be talking about this whole matter of artificial intelligence and how does the Christian relate to that. Then on the 26th of September, we are going to be having Dr. Brown, Associate Secretary of the General Conference, and he is going to be talking to us on the issue of same-sex relations. So we have some very interesting topics lined up for you. We ask that you keep tuned in as we discuss and share on these very important issues. Again, Dr. Johnson, it was a delight to have you. We are so very grateful, and we ask that you will pass on our greetings to the entire administration of the Inter-American Division. And thanks again for your kind support this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Greene, and Dr. Trim is really looking forward to it. We communicated, I think it was on Wednesday. In fact, he expressed a desire after this pandemic to really visit Antigua. So whatever you all can do to make that possible, should it be possible.
All right, sure.
Very exciting, very engaging, and the members and your workers will appreciate it greatly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. God bless.
God bless.